This story explains how Jordan Belfort, later known as the Wolf of Wall Street, began his rise by discovering the power of pure salesmanship. He lied about cheap stocks, made millions, served only 22 months in prison, and then became famous again when Hollywood turned his crimes into a blockbuster movie, despite the damage he caused. Born in 1962 in Bayside, Queens, Belfort grew up in a working-class neighborhood where big dreams were rare, but he was different. As a teenager, he hustled Italianices, making $20,000 in one summer by using simple sales tricks. He briefly enrolled in dental school but walked out on day one after realizing dentistry wouldn't make him rich. He then launched a chaotic door-to-door meat and seafood business that surprisingly pulled in huge sales before collapsing under its own mess. That failure taught him a crucial lesson. The product didn't matter his ability to persuade. Did whether it was meat, stocks, or people themselves, Belfort learned he could sell anything. That realization pushed him toward Wall Street, where he landed his first job at a legitimate brokerage firm during the wild, greed-driven 1980s, setting the stage for one of America's most infamous financial scams. This phase of Jordan Belfort's life was where he got his first real taste of big money, raw greed, and financial power. On Wall Street, he learned how the stock market worked, how brokers spoke, and most importantly, how they sold dreams over the phone. But everything changed in October 1987 when Black Monday hit. The stock market crashed, phones went silent, and panic filled trading floors. Jordan lost his job, but instead of despair, he saw opportunity. That's when he discovered penny stocks cheap, risky shares traded on the pink sheets that serious firms avoided. They were unregulated and hard to sell, but the commissions were massive, sometimes 50% or more. The same sales pitch now paid 10 times as much. No degrees, no experience, just confidence, pressure, and persuasion. Jordan started cold calling everyday people, promising tiny companies would become the next big thing. It was fast, aggressive, and wildly profitable, and it marked the beginning of the scam that would change his life and American finance forever. This is where Jordan Belfort perfected his most dangerous weapon, hype. He sold penny stocks by promising once-in-a-lifetime opportunities that were supposedly hidden from Wall Street. He told investors they were getting in early, before the big firms noticed, with guarantees of huge returns, 10 times their money or more. The pitch wasn't about facts or understanding the company. It was about fear of missing out. Belfort pushed people to act fast, warning them they'd regret it later when the success story appeared in magazines like Forbes. And it worked. With confidence, pressure, and smooth talk, he could close a $4,000 deal in a single phone call. There were no real rules, little oversight, and almost no accountability, just non-stop cold calls, fueled by adrenaline. This chaotic, unregulated world became Belfort's playground. By 1989, he was no longer working alone. He had found his system, his money machine, and the foundation of what would soon become Stratton Oakmont, an empire built on exaggeration, manipulation, and greed. This is where Stratton Oakmont truly took shape. Jordan Belfort teamed up with Danny Porish, a fast-talking hustler from Long Island who wasn't polished or professional, but he could sell. Danny brought raw energy, chaos, and relentless confidence, while Jordan supplied the vision and strategy. Together, they were a dangerous combination. They named their firm Stratton Oakmont, a title that sounded old, elite, and trustworthy. In reality, it was a noisy strip mall boiler room with cheap desks, flickering lights, and no real oversight. The people they hired weren't Wall Street experts. They were bartenders, dropouts, and streetwise talkers. Jordan didn't want education or ethics, he wanted hunger. He wasn't building analysts, he was building closers to shape them. Belfort created his famous straight-line persuasion system, a high-pressure sales method designed to control conversations, crush doubt, and force quick decisions. This was the foundation of an empire built not on value, but on confidence, manipulation, and non-stop selling. At Stratton Oakmont, Jordan Belfort created a high-pressure sales environment designed to transform nervous beginners into relentless closing machines. His training crushed hesitation, silenced doubt, and pushed prospects from a simple hello to "where do I send the check?" in one smooth, non-stop pitch. The office soon developed a wild rhythm, phones ringing non-stop, voices shouting over each other, deals closing by the minute. The atmosphere was loud, addictive, and fueled by ego, greed, and fast money. But Stratton's real strategy wasn't just how they sold it, was who they sold to. They targeted everyday people Wall Street ignored, retirees protecting their savings, parents desperate for security, and working-class investors chasing a better future. What they sold wasn't solid investments, but hope under pressure, wrapped in urgency, fake confidence, and completely made-up projections. This is how Stratton Oakmont turned persuasion into profit and manipulation into an empire. At first, Stratton Oakmont pushed worthless penny stocks, tiny companies that barely existed beyond flashy press releases. But once serious money started rolling in, the scams grew bigger and more dangerous. The firm moved on to real IPOs, quietly buying huge blocks of cheap shares, then turning their sales floor into a non-stop hype machine. Broker after broker flooded the phones, promised massive gains, and created fake excitement to drive prices up. When the stock peaked, Stratton dumped its shares, leaving everyday investors with huge losses. This classic scam is known as a pump and dump, but inside Stratton Oakmont, it was treated like routine business. By the early 1990s, the firm had exploded into a chaotic carnival of greed-screaming phones, air horns, expensive suits, drugs, and wild parties that erased any sense of professionalism. Jordan Belfort ruled it all like a cult leader in designer clothes, rewarding loyalty with money, gifts, and luxury, while humiliating or firing anyone who fell behind. On paper, the company looked unstoppable, raising millions and taking firms public. But beneath the success was nothing but illusion. When truth couldn't be sold, Stratton sold dreams, and by 1994, as the firm drew national attention, cracks were forming in a system built on hype, pressure, and reckless ambition. The firm kept using the same dangerous playbook: hype the stock, oversell the dream, and get out before the truth caught up. But this time, they weren't invisible anymore. The SEC began flagging suspicious filings, and angry investors flooded in with complaints after buying stocks at high prices and watching them crash almost overnight. Even inside the firm, doubts started to grow. Brokers were being pushed to sell companies with no revenue, no real product, and sometimes not even a working phone number. Management's message was simple and ruthless: close the deal or leave. As pressure increased, hiding the money became more complex. Millions were secretly moved offshore through shell companies and fake accounts, some under relatives' names, others in foreign banks using companies that didn't even exist. Cash was even smuggled physically using couriers. Jordan Belfort called this asset protection. To the FBI, it was clear-cut money laundering, man. The walls were finally closing in. Inside the firm, the chaos was spiraling out of control. What once felt like a reward, drugs, excess, and non-stop partying, became a daily necessity just to function. Brokers mixed pills and cocaine to stay sharp, collapsing during sales calls and fighting over money, power, and ego. The office turned violent and unstable, and Jordan Belfort himself was falling apart even faster than the firm. His marriage was collapsing under addiction and lies, and his reckless behavior put lives at risk, including his own family. The breaking point came in June 1996, when Jordan ignored safety warnings and sailed his yacht during a violent storm, forcing a dramatic rescue by the Italian Navy. While he survived, his sense of invincibility was cracking. Back in New York, pressure mounted as journalists and federal investigators closed in. FBI agent Gregory Coleman quietly followed the money-tracking phone scripts, bank records, shell companies, and suspicious cash withdrawals. Even worse for Jordan, insiders began turning on him. Brokers facing charges or unpaid bonuses secretly cooperated with the FBI, wearing wires and handing over evidence. By October 1996, the empire built on hype, greed, and excess was beginning to collapse from the inside. Federal agents finally moved in on Stratton Oakmont just after sunrise, raiding the office and seizing phones, files, and computers, while employees were questioned on the spot. Attempts to destroy evidence failed. The FBI already had what it needed. Even then, Jordan Belfort kept pushing his luck. In early 1997, despite being under investigation and warned not to move money, he secretly wired $2 million to Switzerland. The transfer was traced, the conversation was recorded, and that single move sealed his fate. By 1998, the empire built on cold calls, hype, and false promises had collapsed. Facing decades in prison for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering, Belfort did what he did best. He sold again, this time selling information. He cooperated with authorities, wore a wire, and helped indict more than 30 former employees, many of whom served longer sentences than he did. Belfort himself received just 22 months in a minimum security prison, where he wrote his infamous memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street. Published in 2007, the book turned his crimes into entertainment, presenting excess, fraud, and manipulation as legends cementing the myth of a man who scammed millions and still walked away famous. The public couldn't get enough of Jordan Belfort's story. He sold the film rights, wrote a sequel, and in 2013, his life was turned into a global blockbuster by Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. The same man who lied to investors and destroyed lives was now celebrated on the big screen. Audiences laughed, critics praised the film, and Belfort became a pop culture icon. But the people he scammed never got applause or closure. Teachers lost their retirement savings, veterans lost their life savings, and families were left in debt after trusting his promises. Meanwhile, Belfort reinvented himself as a motivational speaker, sales coach, author, and podcast host, selling success and even lessons on ethics. He wears the nickname The Wolf like a trophy, turning fraud into fame and punishment into profit.